on the cloud. There we go. Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome to Bar to the Bone. We're going to basically talk about stage to film adaptations, our favorites, and maybe even our not favorites, especially if you've seen some recent adaptations. What they might have done right, what they might have done wrong, and it's all opinions here and observations. So there's no wrong answers, there's no wrong observations, and we're not going to be. I don't think we'll get too critical, but I think this is going to be fun. Um, so, for an example, differences between the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet versus the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet, and which one made you feel like they got it and what they did in order to make that happen. Things where they maybe didn't quite get it. So they used both of them used the stars of their time, their young stars, and both of them were up and coming film directors, but they definitely took a different take. Like Zeffirelli used classic outdoors, old style villainies, Verona style courtyards. Baz Luhrmann did a little bit more Los Angeles, using grand staircases and old mansions and trailer parks. So they did a whole completely different take to go from like a classic version to modern. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on that or other things that they prefer to think about, but we can start there, or we can move on to a different something that might be on your mind about what you've seen recently.
Well, I remember when the Zeffirelli came out, which ages me completely, and we all had to go see it and argue with our parents about everything and the cost, but we went and saw it because it's, quote, Shakespeare. The only thing that I've always had problems with adaptations of Romeo and Juliet is basically the Facebook joke about it. It's about a 13 and 14-year-old over 3 days and 6 people die. Now, what makes this a happy romantic comedy, melodrama, whatever you want to call it? And why weren't mom and dad a little more active in the kids' lives so that they knew what their kids were up to, so that they didn't have to have the funerals? Yeah, what were mom and dad up to? Who knows?
Well, I think that also bespoke that. I think that's actually one of the things that actually allows you to look at what both versions, Zeffirelli and Baz Luhrmann, what they both had in common was the parents are going to be busy doing their own thing, running a business, being a merchant, or some kind of shady business dealing person, and they're all about their status. Meanwhile, the kids, and I remember this from being a kid in the 70s, the kids are pretty much left to their own devices. And what they were going to learn was going to be from their friends, whether it was the cousin of a prince, Mercutio, or whether it was going to be from an overbearing and violently raised Tybalt. So they've got, and the whole formation of, opposing gangs and everything. So yeah, where were the parents? Not worried about their kids, and they were very hands off. And there's also, you did have nursemaids, and the nannies, and hand your kid, have a kid, hand them off to somebody who's gonna maybe know how to raise them. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And why weren't they already married off? I mean, they were already 13 and 14 years old. I mean, the bride was old enough to have been married off to somebody at least 50 who had property that would have endeared the family to them even more. And the son was old enough to have already served in a war or two.
At the ages that they depict them, yeah, for that time. Not so much modern age, but but I think that speaks to what both the Montagues and the Capulets wanted to do, was marry their child to somebody with status, or to marry their child with status to somebody that would be worthy of the name that they were passing down. And both families really are about the name. And Juliet's got her whole speech about what's in a name.
Yeah. And you would have laughed because if only the kids had been given books about Clare of Assisi and Francis of Assisi, they might have formed holy orders instead and been known for good for the rest of their lives instead of.
Which can lead us to the friar
Yeah.
and his. I mean, he was pretty much the one raising Romeo. So it's interesting that Romeo is supposed to be this romantic. Romeo is almost a, synonym for romancer
Mm-hmm.
in a way. So having Romeo become, being raised by a priest and then becoming this romancer, why is he the one that's the, as opposed to his friends who are maybe running a little bit more wild with Mercutio?
Yeah. You never know. You never know. Yeah.
So what works in those films? Obviously, I love the Zeffirelli version. I love that the
Same here.
actors are young. I love Michael York as Tybalt. It's just beautiful. Um, and the guy that plays Mercutio, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name, just improving away throughout the entire film, and you don't even notice it. Um, how well he's embedded himself into it. Um, it's what they did right. They have outdoor piazzas. They have the costumes that look right. Um, Very classic Italian looking, Renaissance, and young actors, and they go through the script. I mean, there are definitely cuts because you can't do a Shakespeare play on film without doing cuts. Otherwise, it becomes very long. We know this. Um, but it has like this atmosphere that you just buy into right from the beginning. Um, I don't know if anybody has anything that they've seen in it that they would say would be a flaw in the Zeffirelli version. Um, and I can't think.
I didn't like the fight scenes. I felt the fight scenes, they kind of dragged out and they were just overproduced. I got a little impatient with them.
A little bit long.
Yeah. I
That
think it happens a lot with movies, right? They're taking advantage of all the space that they have and they kind of like expand out what would be shorter moments in the play.
yeah. If that was actually a thing in the 70s, 60s and 70s was the long fight scene. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but if you can look it up, there's a movie called Scaramouche. There's a fight scene that goes through an entire theater. It's about 17 minutes long. It is the longest fencing scene I've ever seen. And yeah, that's when it does go on, as opposed to what we have in the Baz Luhrmann version. Do we want to start with the fights in those were fast gunplay?
Mm.
And over the very first one kind of went on because there was a lot of bullets flying and nothing getting hit. But otherwise, it's I run up to you and I fire a gun and it's over. Bam. And it's kind of scary that way. What do you think they might have gotten right with the Baz Luhrmann one? What maybe turned you off?
I remember not liking it very much when it first came out, and I was the age of the characters at the time. I don't know what it was about that particular adaptation. It was really busy, and for me, I tend to like things that are a little more simple when it comes to Shakespeare. Like, so you focus on the actual words that you're hearing as opposed to all the flashy lights and costumes and things.
Yeah, like there's a point A, a point B, C, D, and they're not. We're going to distract you with a bunch of quick cuts and shaky cam.
Yeah. There were a few scenes like I remember the "Do you bite your thumb at me?" That particular scene sticks in my mind, and I think that one was pretty well done. But most of it I probably have seen it maybe twice in my life, and I barely remember any of it. other than the wings.
Yeah, the wings, Mercutio. I mean, you got to remember that. Just
Yeah.
stylistically, Harold Perrineau bringing it.
Mhm.
Uh, I I also remember the "Do You Bite Your Thumb" scene, and that's you just have this whole thing where they're it's very jittery. It's almost like watching the beginning of Train Spotting, where it's like kind of frantic and it's panicked, as they're trying to figure out do are we in the right, are we in the wrong, are we, and you got to love that scene. It's a great opening.
Yeah.
I kind of meh about the whole reporter on screen, two households bit, but you get to that gas station fight, and then in comes Tybalt, played by John Leguizamo, and that's what I remember, is him just delivering this gravitas to the line, peace, I hate the word. And you just go, oh, things just went to hell. It doesn't matter what we say or negotiate in order to try and just talk at each other. There's going to be gunfire now because this guy came on board. And remember those two scenes, the party where Mercutio spreads his wings. I remember them falling in the pool at one point, but
oh yeah,
and it's like because, and I think this is my biggest criticism of Baz Luhrmann is he comes from directing music videos, and so his movies, and I love his music videos, they're awesome, but for his movies he tends to still go into that chopped up, frenetic, wonderfully visual for a moment, but that it's basically still music video editing and music video filming, and it's not meant to hold your attention for very long, as opposed to something where it seems to flow from one bit to the other, and you can remember Juliet waking up in bed to the sound of the lark and the sun rising in, or the sound of the nurse calling her, or the look on Michael York's face when he realizes that Tybalt's ready to fight him, and that there's a different thing where it's more character based rather than image based, and I think that's why we remember the Zeffirelli version a little bit more clearer in our brains. But I mean, it's still good. But
no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. It's like when you see the Burton Hamlet, and you're going, oh, the movie's about Burton, it's not really about Hamlet.
I actually have not seen that one,
but
I feel as though the Kenneth Branagh Hamlet could be applied the same way.
Yeah, and you just have to laugh because I remember having a fight to get to see Hamlet with Burton in it, because my mother was very upset with him dating Liz Taylor at the time. But I mean, there are so many things we relate to that man for, because he played Prince Arthur, then he dated Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, who was this being that was supposed to play good guys on the movies?
That's actually a good segue, since you mentioned Branagh. There's the Branagh Henry V, and the other one that I've seen was the Olivier Henry V.
Yes.
And this there's something that makes the Branagh version very relatable, because it does open with lighting the match, Ode for the Muse of Fire. He's dressed in modern clothes, and he's like, you know what, I'm in modern clothes and so are you in the audience, but I'm going to bring you into this. Yes, we know that it's all about your imagination, but I'm here representing you. And it just that's a great way to just bring you in.
But one thing about the Olivier Henry V is that was used as a World War II propaganda film for the Brits to keep them going, because when it was released, it was like Alexander Nevsky for the Russians. They decided put the movie first because it brings the people in let's put aside our little arguments here. And
Yeah. And something that drove not the differences, but the similarities to them home for me. Because you have, Olivier can just fill the room. He'll just fill the screen. And he'll still be a stage actor, and he'll be doing stage acting on film. Branagh has whisper moments. So it's like, come in closer and listen and pay attention to what I'm saying. And it's really effective. But what brought it home was I was in Ireland at some castle. I can't even remember which one. And there's this, oh no, I think it was Warwick Castle. And they have a thing where on a display, they had taken the footage from the Olivier battle.
mhm.
So they took the battle in the black and white film, but over it they put the Branagh soundtrack for the battle, which is using like modern Foley, and it's just so much more immersive. So you're watching this much better battle scene, which is much more accurate, because they actually went for authenticity for the Olivier Henry V. It looks like a battle would have looked. Whereas you have a little bit more stylized stuff going on with the Branagh version. But the Branagh version had this wonderfully immersive sound where you saw them loosing arrows, you heard them flying through the air, you heard them hitting. Whether or not that's what the screen showed, you saw one part of that, and you hear the sound continue on through the next few frames while it's focusing on something else, so you know it's still happening. And just combining the two, I was like, they're both great movies on their own merits, and I just loved finding that out that way by just overlapping them. There are a couple places where I thought Olivier was throwing away some lines, but otherwise, he's Olivier. He's going to bring the rest of it. And I would love to analyze where they did the cuts. Oh, yeah, that was it. I remember one of the points I wanted to make about Henry V, but I'm going to have other people talk if they want to.
No, it's one of my favorites and go-to films, because doesn't everybody get a cake on that day anyway to celebrate the Battle of Agincourt? It's a small detail, but it's one of those things, and you always pull that film out, the Branagh film, because it's easy just to stick in the DVD if you haven't got it already on your everything with your TV, and it's just so much fun because you fall in love with Emma Thompson and going banga.
Yeah,
And then
even
you realize how much it led to the Tudors coming into power eventually, and you get a little sad, but that's a personal thing. I'm pro Richard.
the Emma Thompson scenes and the bit with the French, and where they don't really go as dirty as they could go with some of the words that they use in French versus English in that scene, but there's a little bit of gasping, and you're like, oh, I didn't know Emma Thompson wasn't French, because I don't really speak French very well at all. But I'm like, I was fooled.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about Branagh is he always hired his mother-in-law for every one of his films, which was also his downfall. But he always hired her, so you knew that he was trying to be good by doing the right thing and hiring Emma Thompson's mother.
So one of the things that is very cool about the Branagh version, and we can keep talking about this, is he interjects scenes from other parts of the Henriette. He adds stuff from Henry IV, 1 and 2, with the scenes with Falstaff dying, or remembering when he was with Bardolph and Pistol, and all those things that tie in to do not hang a thief. Well, no, you will. And then they do the scene where they hang him, and just bringing in somebody that wasn't in the film into the film, so you kind of know, yes, he actually came from this. It kind of provides you, Henry IV inside of Henry V. It's a wonderful thing. Otherwise, you have to see it in repertory with some other theater company that's doing all three, which some have.
You see how he grows through the three.
Yeah,
and becomes the man whom he had the potential to be.
yeah. And you already know he's going to be Henry V, the king, at some point. But while he's Prince Hal, he gets to have these light japing moments, and then he kind of turns it on its side. And while he's still Hal, he gets the seriousness in him that you can see coming. So it's a fun film, and I think it's a great adaptation for film, for the way it brings you in, and it's great to see on stage as well, obviously. But if I had to choose, that was probably one of the ones that I think that helped a lot of people go, oh, I got this. I enjoyed this. Maybe other Shakespeare isn't that unaccessible. So speaking of Henry IV and Falstaff, so how many of you know about the Chimes at Midnight? Orson Welles loved the character Falstaff so much that he decided to do what pretty much amounts to Falstaff the movie. It's all of his favorite bits from Henry IV, 1 and 2, and from Merry Wives, and it's basically a celebration of Falstaff with Orson Welles in the title role. It's in black and white. It only got released a few years ago, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. If you can find it online or rent it, I do recommend watching it because it's an interesting look at the character and how a person with star power can say, I'm going to do this project. It's not the best work. It's not the best Shakespearean work to my mind, but it got done. And it's sort of, it's I don't want to say it's bad because there's some cool parts in it, but as a project, I'm like, well, did it work for me? And I have to say no. So it doesn't always work. You can't just put Shakespeare on screen and have it enjoyable. Anybody else have any? Go ahead.
Does he just sort of usurped Falstaff parts from the different, was it 3 different plays?
Yeah, from almost 4 different plays. He just does a best of, best of Falstaff in one movie. Kind of like Prospero's books.
I'm kind of Falstaff inhibited. He kind of makes my skin crawl. I know that puts me in the minority, but he's marching around on the field like taking people off to die, and then he happily betrays Prince Hal, tries to take credit. He's just an awful person. I don't understand why people like him so much.
I think he's kind of an anti-hero. He's that rogue. He's that ne'er-do-well rogue that, as long as he's not hurting anybody, it's fun. But if he does wind up hurting somebody, or somebody winds up hurting him, then it's a little bit less fun. I think you really have to pay attention to the way you're delivering it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times either Falstaff is the butt of a joke, or his attempts at humor are cruel and dangerous to other people. And you're like, is he a redeemable character? And, he dies off screen in Henry V. So it's like, well, man, what happened? Well, actually, we actually kind of know Will Kemp bailed on the company, and that's what happened. But that's it's you don't have to love Falstaff, but he's there, so we have to deal with it and actually figure out how are we gonna handle this humor,
Mm.
What's another one that actually just came to mind because of that? Since it was like we just talked about, I used the phrase "best of" Falstaff. There was a movie called Prospero's Books, based off of The Tempest, with John Gielgud as Prospero, and I don't want to go into the details of the movie because it was this weirdly stylized. I don't even it not even worse than Julie Taymor stylizes things. It was it gets hyper Elizabethan, portraity, weird, declamatory. John Gielgud's wonderful, but the rest of it is kind of it's a weird movie, and that's by my standards. Because you have John Gielgud's voiceover even when the other actors are talking or not talking. They're talking in their voices, but they're not saying anything with their mouth. Um, and Ariel is played by three young men. One is a little boy, and then like another like mid-sized boy, and then like a young adult. So it's played by three different people who like switch, take turns. But what we saw in it's called Prospero's Books because they show you some of the books that he took to the island, and they're all magical books. And we were like, man, the parts with the books where they explain what the books do and how they work and what kind of magic they do. Could you just make a movie just about the books? We're like, I know The Tempest. It's a cool story, but could you just do the books? So in that way, I would have liked a different movie than I think what they gave me. So whereas Tempest on stage, you have, problematic colonialism, some racism, some, but you definitely have a worthy stage production that you make sense on its own. You don't need to add the magic books. You don't need to add all of the effects. There's actually a real story in there. So, was there any other ones that we thought of? Any other movies or stage-to-screen adaptations people are particularly fond of?
All I can think of right now there's a series out there about Shakespeare, and Cole Meany's in it. And there's arguments, and then there's another one, a comedy about Shakespeare. And I keep on thinking those, and they keep on popping in my mind because whoever played Shakespeare was always fighting with Cole Meany. And I'm going, you're fighting with Cole Meany. You don't do that. What part don't you understand? Haven't you ever seen En Bruges?
Stop fighting with him. You're going to lose. I know that there's the series Upstart Crow is out.
That was a comedy series. I loved that. It was just like maybe his life was that funny trying to do things.
Maybe. And then you've got Shakespeare in Love. To bring that up, where they're trying to go, hi, here's what went on behind the stage, and you get that wonderful quote. We don't know how it works. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
Which you have scenes that they've done where they recently in Good Omens in the series they show a little bit of the two angels watching a performance of Hamlet.
Yes.
And they're the only ones there.
And given that David Tennant has done Shakespeare both in series and Michael Sheen does absolutely everything.
Yeah. They're both experienced Shakespearean actors, and they're watching this, and they're both really good.
And Doctor Who even brought Shakespeare into the series.
Yeah, there was a whole bit. There was all was that 1 or 2 episodes, or back in the day, like they would spread out a story over like 3 or 4 episodes.
Right. You can now see it as one whole thing, and you can buy it as one whole thing. But it was done on BBC for about 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah. So you gotta love the format. You gotta love how pervasive he is, showing up everywhere, TV and film. I was trying to think of another adaptation. I brought up Julie Taymor. There's Titus Andronicus is one of the ones that she's done. I'm trying to think if there's another. She did do a stage version of The Tempest. Um, any thoughts on how she presents? If you've seen any of her versions.
Did she do the one with Ray Fiennes? Or was that somebody else that did the one with Ray Fiennes?
Oh, was that Coriolanus maybe?
Oh, yeah, Coriolanus. I think
Yeah.
it was Ralph Fiennes and
Sorry, I used the British pronunciation for him. So
okay. I'm drawing a blank. um, I'm not sure that she was the one that did Coriolanus, but yeah, there's so there's definitely there's like an expansive minimalism that happens where she uses what's available and then brings in, you know, hoping to
She did
actually
The Tempest with Helen Mirren,
okay.
which I think my friend and I almost walked out of.
I was psyched to see Helen Mirren as Prospero. That was awesome.
Same, same.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, the execution, it just didn't work for us.
I'm trying to remember it. I think she has the same problem as Baz Luhrmann. Is
Yeah.
there's a frenetic quality to what she's presenting, so that she presents this frenetic scene and motion and like actors emoting rather than focusing on, well, what is the actual story? Do you actually remember the story or the events? Do you remember more than one or two flashes of, you know, a pose from something? And I can't.
I think I remember Russell Brand kind of flitting around the screen very quickly in what was supposed to be a forest.
Yeah, you know, and oh, yeah, you know what I remember most about, and this is sad, about the Helen Mirren Julie Taymor Tempest was you have Russell Brand and Alfred Molina, and not the performance that they gave on screen, but there's a behind the scenes where you have Russell Brand in front of Alfred Molino, who is just watching Russell Brand go off on this improvisational story about how Trinculo got his name, and he's just talking fast and going and like explaining how he was before the king and he made this joke and then he snatched like this drool from the corner of the king's mouth, and Molina is just like sitting back going, I okay. So you see what kind of energy he's planning on bringing to the character, but I can't remember the scene much. I know there was some woohooing and some dancing around in skirts, but I don't remember the scene, but I remember knowing that they put in that kind of work. I'm like, I wish I could remember the rest of the movie better.
what was the movie that they had that was set basically at that time, but it was about Shakespeare, but I can't remember everything about it. But one of my favorite lines was that the King of Spain was going to invade England with some friends of his, and they gathered everybody, and my favorite line of his was, "Let's go kill a queen." And they get on a boat and they wind up and they get lost up in England because they're trying to be in disguise, but they totally blotch absolutely everything. And they have Walsingham in it, and the whole crew and everything like that.
I'm going to have to look that up. That sounds.
It was funny. It was
fabulous.
you just start laughing and everything like that, because if it doesn't work, they put it in.
It's like, yeah, this is a little bit left of center, and we're going to use it. We're going to keep doing it.
And Damian Lewis was supposed to be in it, and supposedly they gave him a very tiny bitty part, and he got stuck down in Spain in prison or something like that because he was going to be the ambassador or something like that. He's going, it's like, I'm Damian Lewis. I'm supposed to have a big part. They give him this little bitty tiny part.
I'm going to make a little note here to look that up on IMDb later on. Okay, there we go. Any other adaptations or anything you wish they did that they would put on film that you think would work?
Did I hear last night Daniel Craig saying he's going to be doing Macbeth on stage?
I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah,
That does sound kind of familiar.
Yeah, because I think he was on Colbert last night talking, or the other day, talking about being on stage again
That would be
during
brilliant.
Macbeth.
I would love that. That would actually be really really cool. Because I just if you don't, we just had the Denzel Washington Macbeth, um, which and just a couple of years ago we had
Patrick
another Macbeth that had Marion Cotillard as Lady M, and I know you can translate Macbeth to film.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm
and
sorry for not calling it the Scottish play. I apologize.
it's okay. No, we're on
Not
Zoom.
actually in a theater, so.
I'm not on a stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's fine. So I saw what they were trying to do, and I get it. And obviously, much love to Denzel Washington. Thank you. More of this, please. And I can't remember her name, but the late person who played Lady Macbeth as well. And
Frances McDormand.
Frances McDormand, and then you've got the guy who played Neville as is in it, and you got all these wonderful people delivering really good performances. But it and the lady and the woman who was playing all of the witches,
Mm-hmm.
which is just, there's a style that was going on, but for some reason it seemed to drag, and it didn't pull me in the way I wanted to be pulled in, and I'm still working out why didn't it work for me.
Oddly enough, this was one of the sort of stylized film versions that didn't bother me. I actually really enjoyed it. And Denzel Washington in particular, I really liked what he did with the character of Macbeth, because it seemed more of just sort of like he's a very good soldier, but he's clearly not a leader. And there's a difference between those two things. And he played that very well from start to finish. And just kind of watching his sort of descent into madness by the end of it made me want to see him do King Lear now.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Because I there is footage where you can see
I think it was especially that one, the monologue that he had in the tent where he was talking to himself.
Yeah, and that wasn't like an instantaneous, oh, by the way, I'm mad, or I'm crazy, or I am maniacally a murderer now. No, it's, I am used to being a soldier and killing. Oh wait, now I have to think, and I am not handling it. And it was a slow progression, and I really liked that. There were things I loved about the film, but it wasn't, as a start, it didn't draw me the way I wanted to. And I loved the things that they were doing with the witches. I love that she burns the evidence of his letter, which mentions the treason, and I've never seen that done before. And I'm like, thank God somebody did that. So I'm pleased with what he did and what he put into it. I'm just like, what was missing? And it wasn't the black and white. It wasn't the angles. It wasn't the, I don't know, maybe I wasn't ready. So, as opposed to some films where they add a lot of Foley in the background to make you anxious. And I don't know, maybe that was part of something that happened, is maybe there was background noise or something. So.
Yeah. Well, sometimes black and white really does help when you've got a screenplay, because totally non-Shakespeare. But I watched all of Star Trek Next Generation in black and white, and I focused on the scripts and the acting and never worried about the backgrounds or the sci-fi effects, because I was focusing on the acting and on the screenplay.
I'm going to do that. that actually, I like that idea. Yeah, I can't imagine what it would have been like watching this if it was in color, and then I would have been able to nitpick the colors or something, and it was just
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I definitely don't think this one would have worked in color.
yeah.
Have you seen the 2015 version? Director was Kurzel
Let me
of
see if I
Macbeth.
can look that up real quick.
It's
The
kind of the opposite. So like the landscapes of Scotland are like way played up in that version. It's very scenic.
Yes, that's the other one I was talking about. That the Curzel version with Michael Fassbender, Marianne Cotillard, David Thewlis. Yeah, and
It's very
that was one.
yeah.
Yeah.
It might
Um,
be distracting when you know a play really well and it's way cut down. You keep like, wait, that line's, where's that line? You know, and you kind of
yeah.
get thrown.
Right. That was one where it seemed like that was brutally cut. I mean, the visual mood. Let's enunciate here. Was brilliant.
And the music. Yeah.
I loved how it was gritty with purpose, not just, which is different from the Denzel Washington version, which seemed very clean. um, but yeah, it was gritty and dirty, and you're like it was a good mood. I enjoyed going to it, but how heavily it got cut, and they cut you like, oh, I wanted to hear him deliver that line, and then he doesn't because it got cut from the script for some reason, God knows why. Um, and a big difference in one of my touchstones for watching Macbeth is, what do they do with the Porter scene? Because to me it's an important scene because it gives you a breath to go, murder, 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 and then wait, breathe, because we need you to reset your levels of threat back down so we can dial it back up again. And it's crucial to me. And they completely cut it from the Fassbender Cotillard version. And they had it played by Stephen Root in the Denzel Washington version. And I'm sorry to relay it by actors, but that's the way I remember the actors. I don't remember directors. I'm sorry. But that's just one of the things I do is you have, did they cut it? What did they do with it? Was it fun? Did it feel rushed?
Right.
And that, I think, was part of what bothered me is you have a really nice even pacing for most of the film, but the Stephen Root Porter bit felt rushed. And I don't know if it's because he didn't want you to get that chance to breathe, which maybe they don't for film, but I think it's still necessary for the play to make it effective. Just like all of the clowns are, if you have a clown in tragedy, you have to keep him in so that gives the audience a chance to breathe. Same as like Llewellyn in Henry V. You have to have a chance to breathe so that you can then build back up the tension. Whereas if you're just riding along on this even tension this whole time, by the end you're exhausted and you're like, at the end you're going, what happened? Did we win? I don't know. Was it a success? Did we beat the bad guy? Was he a bad guy? So that's one of my personal touch for what did they do for the comedic bits? Do they let you have it so you can breathe, or do they just kind of gloss over or completely remove it?
It's kind of, sometimes it's a little hard for me, the Shakespearean humor, like it has to be sold in a certain way, kind of it seems like it's kind of challenging for a lot of movies and productions for when they try and do the, like thinking of the Branagh Much Ado About Nothing.
Yes.
And is just so heavy-handed with the guard, with the watchman. Just, I forget the name of the actor.
Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
As Dogberry. Yeah.
So I don't know how you feel about that, but for me, that was like, this is kind of time and a half too much. But I could see how it'd be really hard to get that level.
Could that be in part because we changed the way we pronounce words, and what used to be a very funny little witty saying
Mhm.
now has a totally different pronunciation. So we're going, huh? That's
Yeah,
supposed to be
or,
funny.
or
The
like
malaprops from 1600 are not the same as what we have today.
Mhm.
right, and the
Yeah,
slang words. A lot of
and the
times
slang
that
words.
point, right?
Yeah,
I'm talking about my genitals when I say, and it gets a
we're
little hard
going
to.
or going back to the rude wordplay in the French scene from Henry V.
Right.
So and there is a language thing, and it can be translated. I mean, BSF shows that you can.
Right.
Um, and I want to I would bring up, you can't. There's two types of Shakespearean humor. One is that one that we don't have recorded as a visual thing, is the antics that they would do, which would be the physical humor of that time versus the physical humor of our time, and that's the thing that you could just put in. Um, and that's sometimes it's delegated to the fools, sometimes it's dedicated to second characters. It was there, we know it happened, and you can still do it on film or in modern performances. What you can also do with the words is you can know what they mean, and part of what you need to do, and this is a personal philosophy, is if you're not enjoying it, the audience isn't going to enjoy it.
Mhm.
So, are you just trying to ham it up and put on a pirate accent and, um, make weird faces? Or did you do the work and learn what all the words and how to do the malapropisms, and so that you're enjoying making fun of your own sounds? And I think, and I actually want to attribute this to Chris, is the joy that you find in Shakespeare and in the words and in what you're doing is what brings the audience along, so that even if they don't know what the words actually mean, they can infer from your mood. And I think you lose some of that in film, or you lose some of that in modern performances. So, because yeah, you still have to listen to the director and do what they tell you.
Of course, you do worry that in heaven, that Winston Churchill still takes his copy of all of Shakespeare's plays to hear any of the performances of any past actors that went to heaven and are performing it up there, because he used to drive every director nuts as he sat there reading every line as they would go through it.
I've heard about that, and that's a nightmare, because I know we cut the scripts and if nothing else for time, so we don't have a 4.5 hour Hamlet, which that was the Brana version. Well, he released he did release a cut version, but it's still very long. It's like, we're going to do every single line. Okay, it's been done. Now I can watch the entire thing and go, well, that's why that got cut. Or it's like, all right, we're doing all of the soliloquies. Okay. So it doesn't have to be a long play. It doesn't have to be unenjoyable or whatever, unless you strap in for it and you buckle down and you buckle in and you go, I'm on for this ride. Let's see. So, we're coming out to the end of the hour. Any ideas about things you might be looking forward to seeing? Obviously, let's see. I would love to see. I'll let other people go first because I have ideas. Because they just did the Anthony Hopkins Lear that was made for Netflix. No, it's for Amazon Prime. So, which was good, but I wanted more from it. But any ideas of what you would love to see or what you're looking forward to seeing, if you know something's coming up?
Anything that you all will be doing, because you are the one bit of sanity for Shakespeare in our city. And that is the one thing that I truly, truly love going, because it just takes me back in time, and whatever goes from a past life was actually in that time is going,
We're looking forward to it too. We do have a couple things that we're hoping to bring out. So um, there should be a Kestrel on the Air of Twelfth Night. We are planning. Sorry, Kestrel on the Air of The Winter's Tale. We are going to be doing a outdoor summer 1 hour production of Twelfth Night, and then this fall there is the Tragedy of Miriam, which is still happening. I'm not sure exactly what format it's going to come into, and we're still working on making this a better, how a strong company that can push forward, and hopefully we'll be bringing even more in 2023. So
That'll be great. That'll be great because
Yeah.
it is the best. It is a Baltimore treasure, and we must remember that.
And bringing Mini Midsummer and Lear last year, as long as the 2 radio plays, it was a good. That was a good season, considering that we were like right in the middle of a pandemic, and then we had that 1 break. So, and we're hoping to bring more, and we're making sure that we're careful.
Well, if we want to be true Elizabethan and Shakespearean, why are we including all the health measures? Because they just went to the theater, and if you dropped, you dropped.
Well, we actually have.
I'm sorry, I may jest.
I can actually address that.
Being alive myself, so
yeah. I can actually address that. We actually did have statistics that we looked at for whether or not we would actually run the show or have rehearsals or do a show based on actual numbers, which were very similar to the limits that, okay, not the same limits, but in the 1600s during the plague, the limit was no more than 30 deaths in the city that week. If you had less than that, you could stay open. And there were references in other plays about, oh, well, we've got the plague 40 happened, so we can't open. It's like, oh, okay. So they did have a measurement even then of, here's how many deaths we find acceptable. And we're like, we don't find any deaths acceptable. And we don't even want anybody to get sick coming to our performances. So we're really glad.
I was just making a jest. I was just
making
a jest.
It's great.
Here's an idea of something you might want to try. It's sort of a fusion concept of, you've got the plays by Shakespeare, but put a different spin on them. Looking at other groups that might have done them. Do a Monty Python spin on something, or one of those types of groups, or even a dramatic group, and that way you have you're going, huh? And as you're laughing at certain things, or certain things that were supposed to be very funny, you're going, oh, they wouldn't make it funny, would they, on that show?
Although we do enjoy watching adaptations, I'm pretty sure that one of our things is still like making sure that we're text informed. So the text is everything for us. But we do actually look and watch and keep ourselves informed as other versions come out. So we're not ignoring it, and we do. We love it.
How do you feel personally when they reset a Shakespeare play in a different time? Like, I forget which one it was, when they set it in Stalinist Russia, and it was one of the dramas and everything like that. So maybe it was Macbeth, and they set it in Stalinist Russia and everything. So I'm
going to talk about another theater troupe for a second, who did 2 different Julius Caesars. One was done as kind of a near future science fiction. So it was 2064 instead of 64. And the other one was done as a Stalinist Russia piece. So they do look at, how can we apply these concepts into those things. And also shout out to other theaters that are doing the work. Chesapeake Shakespeare Company, the Rue Mechanicals, the Fools and Madmen, who did a wonderful version of Lear and a great version of Much Ado. And this summer is finally getting to do their version of Julius Caesar. So I am, yeah, and we're looking forward to that. We are we're excited to see other companies and what they're doing.
Oh, no, it'll be great. It'll be great. But you all are the role model that all try to attain the level of.
I like to say we're originalists. Hello, JP. So, anyway, so thank you for joining. Thank you for spending your time talking movies, stage, and Shakespeare. And we will see you in April, I hope, because that is when we will be talking about what's coming up with the Kestrel on the Air Winter's Tale. And we hope to have some content for you based on that. We will also be talking about and we'll have a session on Intro to Text. We are going to be having a session on prophecy and witches and tragedies therein. So I think you can get where that's going. And we hope to have a really wonderful discussion at some point, since Baltimore Shakespeare uses contemporary music for their intermission and their performances. We're going to take a look at the contemporary music of the 1600s for Shakespeare's time and what that was actually like. Because since we're not using it, we should actually say maybe this is what you're missing out on. And we've done a little bit of it when we had the Dowland pre-show for Hamlet. And there's been other instances, such as when we had the Willow Willow song for Othello. But there are others that are common, well-known Shakespearean songs, and we hope to explore a little bit of that. So, thank you for joining. Great to see you all.
Great to see you, and thank you for hosting.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, we will all leave now, so that way you can talk to the official people.